Well, hello, everyone. It's terrific to be with you today. My name's Colin Dunn. I'm a director and co-founder here at Panalitix. And thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedule right now. It's important to focus on how you can build a resilient accounting firm as we come out of the pandemic that has gripped the world. And I'm delighted today to be holding an interview with a good friend and colleague of mine, Michael Mekhitarian. I'll introduce Michael to you in just a moment. He's a director at ATB Chartered Accountants and Business Mentors based in Parramatta in New South Wales. So Michael has been good enough to give us his time today, and he'll be sharing lots of ideas that I know you'll get a lot of value from. So in terms of mindset for this webinar, what I'd suggest that you do is grab a pen and paper, make lots of notes. You will get the recording, but the more notes you take, the more invested you'll be in the process. And I think you'll get a lot of value. If you just get one or two ideas out of this and then implement them, that's going to be the key. It'll be a worthwhile investment of your time. Let me just go through a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce Michael for you. At any time, you may ask questions during the course of the webinar. Of course, if you're watching a recording of the webinar, then we won't see those questions live. But if you're on the webinar live today, please just find the question box. It's in the webinar control panel on the right-hand side, and just drop your question in there. We're monitoring the questions as they come through, and Michael's been kind enough to say he'll answer those on the fly as we go. We are, as I mentioned, recording the session. And so you'll get a follow-up email from us afterwards with a link to that recording. And we encourage you to share that amongst your colleagues in the profession as well, and amongst your team. That's going to be extremely important to get everybody involved as we consider resilience in our accounting businesses moving forward. So with that out of the way, please welcome Mr. Michael Mekhitarian. Michael, wonderful to have you here.
Hello, Colin. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to some questions that make us both think and ponder.
Absolutely, that's the key, and we should always be challenging ourselves and thinking about new ways of doing things. Michael, you've been working with Panalitix for a long time, and what always fascinates me is you keep coming back for more, and that might just be one of the keys that people can take out of that. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Colin, so I think it's about 10 years. And at that point of time, we were a 3-partner firm, but I think we had 2 employees.
Yeah.
Essentially. And we made a decision at that point of time whether we wanted to grow or not to grow. Right now, we're about 20 employees, so we have grown. And the reason, I guess, at that point of time was that 3 partners, and in some ways would sit and would talk and would talk and would talk and would talk, and not necessarily move forward with it. But that was okay, because the conversation started, and we talked about what we wanted to do. So we felt that probably the best thing to do was to take ourselves out of the business and get a third party, in other words, a coach, a mentor, to start sort of, making us more accountable even to ourselves. And so that's where we started.
Great. So that's really helpful, and I think everyone on the call, just take that on board. So this has been a journey. It's a process. There's no quick fix here. So just tell us, Michael, about the sort of clients that you're working with, the sort of services that you provide, and anything else that might be useful. Just give context to people joining us today.
Sure. So we don't have a specific demographic of people, clients, or geography for that matter. We have interstate clients. We're based around Sydney for those who are overseas, but outside of Sydney in Parramatta. Most people in Australia know where that is. And we have startups, we have mum and dad businesses, but predominantly we have, I guess, family businesses is the way to describe it. So these are families that own businesses with 20 employees, that sort of stuff. That's probably where we're most effective because we are dealing with, larger things where they're more complex problems. We have clients based interstate in Parramatta, obviously, and we have overseas clients that we act for their local operations in Australia. The type of services we offer, so it is broad. So we offer the virtual CFO type service. I think the Americans would really call that a controller rather than CFO. So that is their bookkeeping to really high standard, up to date, very pointy. It might be daily, etc., etc. We then, do the traditional compliance work. That is the lodgement of all the, the things that go with reporting to the governments at whatever level, income tax, GST, FBT, etc., etc. We then do what we call our business blueprinting. In business blueprinting, we term it as essentially three-way budgets, and starting with the end in mind. What are we trying to achieve? Where are we trying to get to? Developing KPIs out of that to what are we going to watch? What are we going to monitor? What are we going to measure? We ended up codifying that into a sort of a process. We call it the 5-step process. I won't go into that right now because, that would suck up a bit of time. But so we put things in context of that paradigm, that 5-step process. And when we talk to our clients, we say, okay, well, we are now at the implementation stage and we've got to make sure we implement this. And after we implement, we measure. Was it successful? What went right? Et cetera, which is pretty similar to the Panalitix journey too, by the way. So, yeah.
Yeah, and of course. So this is interesting, and everyone listening today. Sometimes when you attend a webinar, you might hear something but not hear it. So, Michael, one thing I picked up there was you don't say to a client, let's do a cash flow and budget. What you say is we have a product called our business blueprinting. And that's a very different approach, right? So suddenly you're grabbing the client's attention. Do you find that a focus on product development has been important for you? So figuring out how do I put something in a box so I can market that and sell it to a client?
Yes, because it is marketing, and the true sense of the word of marketing is actually, getting to understand what you do. Key points. Before we joined Panalitix, we had trouble explaining to people what we did. We'd say we're accountants. We count numbers. And, the question is, so what does that do? Oh, well, does this. So now we talk about, we help you take control of your business.
Right. Very different.
Yes. And they go, oh, how do you do that? We do it by developing a business blueprint. Oh, what is a business blueprint? Well, a business blueprint has these elements. So exactly, it's a different focus. Rather than saying I'm an accountant, I lodge tax returns. It's we improve business. So we help you take control of your business. Yeah.
Right. So this is all in the language, and so often when I'm talking to accountants, and I tend to find this more with team members, but with some partners as well. And I'll say, so what do you do? And they'll say, oh, I'm just an accountant. So this is so much more than being just an accountant.
It's particularly Australians, we have a tendency to self-depreciate ourselves rather than shout it out from rooftops and be proud about what we do, and proud of our achievements. And I'm very proud of our guys, our team, what we've achieved as a team. Proud of myself of what I've achieved. But that's it's not just me; it's a team as well. And and it's also the people that have influenced us. So it's our colleagues that are part of Panalitix that have been through that journey. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's also you guys who've sort of challenged us from time to time to say, so, where are you going with that? And, when you, as you would know, Colin, when you articulate these things, it broadens up what you're thinking.
Absolutely. It forces you to think it through. And then
correct.
If we can engage with the clients using content that makes sense and context that they can really grab onto and say, yeah, now I understand what you're talking about, that's a very, very different conversation. And by the way, I think that's one of the main issues that prevents a lot of accountants from successfully moving into advisory work. But let's come to that later when we talk about the advisory. So let's just wind the clock back a little bit here. So you mentioned that you started working with us about 10 years ago. The firm looked very, very different then.
Yes.
But if you can think back that far, just tell us a little bit about some of the first things that you changed in the business. What did you focus on? What did you implement first?
Yeah, look, I don't think it was one thing, Colin. I think it was a number of things that we felt we had to change. So one of the first things we felt we had to change was to give ourselves more time. And by that, our managers or the people that are working for more responsibility to do things at a higher level so that we could actually have the time to do other things. And, those other things were to think about what the business is, to talk to new clients, to find new team members and all of those things. So if, as we were in a very reactionary way, where it'll be, well, I'm too busy to do anything because I have to finish this work. And when I finish this, I'm going to bill it. And then somewhere in the future, I'm going to get paid. So we had to find ways of creating capacity. So that was probably the first thing we did. So how do we create capacity? Well, we offshored. We implemented systems, et cetera, plus workflow processes. We spent a lot of time training our team on being able to do higher level things and work more efficiently. And we also changed what we changed what we did in the sense that we stopped diving into things, but rather mentored our team to say, okay, well, you've come to this point. Now to go to the next level, this is what you need to do. So that was quite a journey to do that. And not everything worked as smoothly as we thought it would work, but we kept on pushing through. So for example, one of the things that, you guys talked about, and I really remember this, was about the CSA role, about accountants doing accountant work, the CSA, engaging with the clients to get information in. So we've been about 10 years into it, and at one of our meetings, and I know we're going to talk about our engagement now, our team building meetings that you chair, probably about 4 years ago, our CSA said the number of queries and the number of times I've got to go back to accountants has dramatically dropped. And it took about 6 years to get that right. So what we were doing there was we developed checklists for every single client. And as we were, whatever we were doing, if it was a matter of doing their business budgets or their quarterly BAS or their year-end work, whatever it was, we would send them a checklist ahead of the work and say, this is the information we need. So at first it was, the admin team was saying things like, well, we don't really understand what you need, et cetera, but now they do. So what's happened is the accountants are saying, oh, that's great. We're getting the information, more complete. It's never going to be 100% complete, but more complete the first time round. The clients are saying, this is fantastic. I've got a list to work off and I can just check through. When that information comes back, our protocol now is that somebody has to check that information in detail within 24 hours and respond to the client.
Right.
Clients are loving it because they're saying, oh, you guys are really on the ball. It was only, yesterday that I gave you that information. You've already come back to me and said something's missing. In the old days, it was, you guys have had that for 3 months. What's going on?
Yeah.
So, they're the type of things we did, Col.
Right. So for the benefit of those who haven't worked with us before, the CSA, the client service assistant, administrator, coordinator, so different firms have different terminology for that. So just briefly, Michael, just describe the role of that person, if you don't mind, or how you've interpreted that in your firm.
Okay, so that person is essentially, the role of that person is to engage with the client to make sure that their information flows both ways. So they're saying, we sent out a business activity statement 3 days ago and you haven't responded.
Yeah.
They're saying your information isn't in yet and we're scheduled to have your work finished. They're communicating with the client on a daily basis. So what that means is that the accountants are able to sit and concentrate on completing their job. Now, somebody might say, well, that restricts the engagement of the accountant. Well, no, it doesn't, because typically with our clients, we'll have quarterly or monthly meetings. Right. That will be with myself to develop strategy. We bring those managers into that meeting, particularly with these Zoom meetings, and it's a great way to do it because that is the engagement they have. So it's not, I've got such and such on the phone, he's not quite sure what, bank statement's missing, et cetera, et cetera. They're more engaged in the strategy. So just on that note, what happens there is because we're both in on that meeting, a couple of things. So the client feels very well looked after. He knows he's got several points of, contact to the firm. They clearly know that, not everybody's available all of the time, but they know the people that they're working with. Second thing is that as we're working through the issues, my role is to interview, to develop strategies, to ask the questions. The client manager's role is to take the notes, to offer any suggestions if we've missed something, because they're very close to the numbers. And then, so once that meeting's over, I don't have to sit down and brief somebody. And that briefing of somebody after you've had a meeting can be somewhere where you let things slip through the cracks.
Right.
Because you might go from one meeting to the next, and you've forgotten a small piece of information. So, that's the advantage. So that means I can bounce from one meeting, talk about strategy, et cetera. That meeting, no doubt, will develop some more requirements. And then from there, I go to another meeting and do the same thing.
Perfect. So when you talk about creating capacity, you've created an administrative role to make sure that the accountants are doing what they should be doing, freeing up time at all levels to focus on the clients. That's really, really important. So let me ask you this. Everything you've talked about sounds simple. And I firmly believe that most accountants know what to do, but they just don't do it. Why do you think that happens?
Look, I think most business owners know what to do, and they do the same thing. So it's there's a difference between knowing what to do and knowing how to do it. Mm-hmm. So let's think of a business owner. He might know that he needs to improve his cash flow. But how are you going to do that?
Right.
That's our role, to help him understand, techniques, methods, all of those things around that. We both know that might be something reasonably simple. It might be actually something really complex and, take time to get some moving parts around in terms of, payment terms overseas, or if they're manufacturing, those sort of things. So, so I think 10 years ago, we knew intuitively what we needed to do, but we really didn't know how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
We do now, but that's where the coaching club at the time came into play, because as we took ourselves out of Parramatta and travelled to Queensland, a couple of things happened. We used to go there the day before, and we would have the opportunity as three partners to have a deep conversation, as opposed to, hey, Kyle, I'm really busy today. Can we grab 5 minutes? I need to talk about something.
Mm.
And if sorry, mate, haven't got time. Can we leave it till Friday? So what happened was we now had a forum to go, well, actually, we'll wait till we go away and we can talk about those things, number one. Number two, our colleagues in those meetings were facing similar problems.
Right.
At different levels, different businesses. They gave us insights to some of the things they had tried. And, different things work for different firms. And then thirdly, coaching club then, allowed us to focus on, well, what is the next thing to implement in that journey, and think it through. So, you became our mentors as we went through that process. And then, quite frankly, we were not going to go back to, the next quarterly meeting and say, we've done nothing. We're too competitive for that. So there's the accountability aspect, you know what I mean?
Right. Mm. So there's the what to do, then there's the how to do it, and then there's accountability to make sure that you do it once you know how to do it. And of course, you found I'm sure you found your clients have exactly the same issue as you had.
Exactly the same issue,
Mm-hmm.
to different extents in different areas. But in general, yes. And that's, okay. That's part of our business improvement program.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's some of the basics that you worked on early on. Now, I remember a long, long time ago, you were saying, we want to grow this business. And now you're consistently growing and new leads are coming in, and you've got clearly defined sales processes around that, and so on and so forth. It wasn't always like that, though, was it? So what have you changed in terms of marketing and sales?
Okay, so we touched on it before, Colin. We talked about how we talk about what we do. We've got a lot of genuine case studies on our website of real people doing real things. Mm-hmm. Unlike some other of our competitors, we've got who we are, what we do, what we believe in, why we do things, and we're quite transparent with that. Some of our competitors, it's very flash, but there's no real people, there's no real stories, there's no heart, soul to it. So that's that aspect. So we're trying to be very real about what we do, who we are, and our service offerings. Next thing is because we created capacity, and we're really talking about our team's capacity, but we created capacity for ourselves as the owners to do two things: work on the business and also to market the business. So we now have the time to go to conferences, to speak, to do webinars, to attend networking meetings, to just hop in the car and drive around and see a client to say, how are you? Have a cup of coffee with them. Before, we were too busy to do that, because we'd have to finish this work because there's a deadline. So that's probably what we've done. So because we're active, and because we're out there, and because we're transparent about who we are, we're finding work is coming to us. I'll give you an example. So March, as COVID-19 is taking grip, and there's just fear in the business community about where this is all going, and quite justifiably. We took the attitude that we needed to speak to the client sooner rather than later, because we were getting phone calls, what about this package? How's this going to work? What should I do? Is the bank going to do this? All of those things. And, genuine fear and concern. So we got our hand in. I won't talk about where it's from. Some people might realise it. And the view was that should be charged for. And we took the view that, you know what, we need to get to as many clients as possible. So we booked a half-hour meeting with every single client on Zoom. And we went through this, this COVID, survival plan with them. And we said to them, look, we're doing this for free. We're not going to charge you. We just want to run through everything that's available and everything you should be aware of. Right now, legislation's evolving. We're not quite sure what it means for you, but understand we know what's going on and we've got your back. That was the message. The second part of that conversation was we're ready on the cloud. All of our team is working from home. We can service anything you need. Phones are working, etc., etc. If you've got any friends that are not getting this from their accountants, can you refer them to us? Because in this, we think we're going to lose some clients because unfortunately they might not survive, and we need to, build our own business. So we got some referrals out of that. Now, the other thing that happened out of that was that 85% of the clients sort of said, oh, great, so you've got our back, you know what's going on, we can concentrate on what we need to do. 15% are still concerned and, might be phoning up, in a bit of a panic. When we went back to them to say, okay, we believe, for example, you can take state government grant and you're eligible for JobKeeper, this is the fee, they just went, fine, proceed. So again, it's about positioning ourselves and explaining how we are able to help early in the piece, being proactive rather than reactive. And a couple of clients we picked up were saying, they've been phoning their accountants to ask for advice, and they were told, look, to get back to them, they'd have to go to, some seminars to find out what's going on. So, that message from those accountants was, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a few things there. So first of all, you've been on the front foot, proactive.
On the front foot, proactive.
So now here's the thing. If I go to a random selection of 50 accountants' websites, I'll see the word proactive on probably 45 of them. But there's a difference between saying you're proactive and being proactive, right? So let's talk about that. How have you created that culture of client focus and proactivity in your firm?
Yeah, okay. So that is part of the 10-year journey, and it's not something you do by flicking a switch. So that is about the culture of our team and of our firm, and we've spent a lot of time talking about it internally and making sure everybody's on the same page, on the same bus with that. So part of that is now, our coaching club now is your good self meeting with the entire team. And, you can talk a bit about this as well, but our focus there is on how do we improve the business and how do we engage better with clients? And, that is, how do we become proactive? What are the issues coming up? How do we get to things faster? So it's a number of things. It's the culture of the firm. It's the choice of the software you use. It's also the way you engage with clients. It's the sort of communicating with them and just randomly calling them with no other reason to say, haven't spoken in a while, how are you?
Right.
And that is where they come back and say to you, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you, and this is happening, that's happening. It's about the culture. So you have to be in a position, and you have to have the capacity to be proactive. And if you don't have the capacity, you will fail.
Right.
So you've got to build the capacity first. Because if you say you are proactive, that means you've got to get out there and say to them, hey, we've just finished your quarterly BAS, and there's a couple of things we want to talk to you about.
Exactly.
We're going to book a meeting. We're going to book a meeting, and, our client manager and myself are going to be in on that meeting, and there's a couple of things we need to talk to you about. Whatever that thing is, whatever it is. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be an opportunity, it could be simply that, we're noticing in this industry other people are doing these things. Whatever that is, so that's about being proactive.
So we need to remove the excuses is what I'm hearing there. So it's it's not enough just to say, yeah, we're a proactive firm, but we've got to stop saying, oh, I'm too busy to do that. What does that say to you when you hear that an accountant is too busy to build their firm or create resilience or talk to clients or do sales meetings and so on and so on? What's really happening there?
Bluntly, they've got their head in the sand. Because being proactive is a mindset. Saying you're too busy, the question is too busy with what?
Mm-hmm.
And when you work out what you're too busy with, then there's a couple of options there. So if you're too busy because you're doing too many client meetings, you've got to figure out, well, do I have the right team members behind me? Have I got enough resources, et cetera, et cetera? If you're too busy doing compliance work, you got to ask yourself, is that the best use of your time? Can you offshore some of those tasks? Can your senior people do that? And if they can't do that, why can't they do that? So, you've got to drill back down to why you're too busy. I love it when I'm too busy doing client meetings.
Right, doing the right things.
Yes. If I'm busy, reviewing tax law, I'm probably not spending my time where the business needs me to be.
Yeah. So Anna, thank you for your comments. Anna, Anna said, love the content, appropriate not just for clients, but to all businesses. And so I encourage all of you on the call here to think about that. So when we're talking about what you can do in your accounting firm, you can take pretty much everything we're talking about here and apply that to your client, which really segues us neatly into a question we've had from quite a lot of people who've joined us today, this whole conundrum on business advisory. So as we think about advisory work, I mean, there is no silver bullet here, and you've got to work hard at that. You need to create the capacity to do it and so on and so forth. But how have you been able to really transition the firm from a compliance-based practice into a really strong business advisory firm? So what have been the key things that you've done?
So first of all, the term advisory, let's have a think about what that means. So does that mean you give tax advice or structuring advice? Or does that mean you are advising businesses on how to improve their performance? A lot of people talk about advisory in terms of the technical advisory. They don't really concentrate on how to get a business to improve. So we went back to, quite frankly, Simon Sinek and start with why. And we went back to, why we're in business and, what is our purpose and what are we trying to do? And we as a firm believe in small business because we believe that the prosperity that small business provides enables us all to have better lives. And that journey we had with Panalitix helped us sort of understand that a lot better. Now, when you have that attitude and that culture, the advisory is, how do we improve people's businesses so they can improve their lives? So this is not, I'm going to save you $5,000 in tax. This is, how are we going to help you enjoy your life in business for whatever your purpose is. So does that mean you want to spend more time with your kids? Does it mean, you want to be in business and you want to, you want to donate money to charity? Do you want to improve, people's lives overseas? What drives you as a business? When we find that out, we find out how we can help them achieve their goals. And that becomes a partnership with them, So our culture is about really helping those family businesses, as we talked about, achieving what they want to achieve, whatever that is. That is true advisory in my view. When we talk to our clients, we talk about our passion in these things, and what happens is things come out of that. And we explain to them, a good business is you're making money, we're making money, we enjoy working with you, you enjoy working with us. And, all of those things come into play.
So the first thing that I'm hearing there is you need to understand what it is that your clients want to achieve. So
yes,
can you scale that? So in other words, have you been successful in getting non-partners in the firm to have those sorts of conversations?
Yes, I have. So our we touched on it before, Colin. I talked about how, as we've created the capacity in the firm by introducing certain techniques, aspects, processes, it's created capacity both in the partners' lives, but also the accountants and managers. So we now engage with our clients at a strategy level with a client manager and a client partner. So what that means is, in essence, I can meet more people. I can deal with more clients because I'm working very closely with the client managers, and they take it from where the strategy leaves off, but they also input into that strategy. And that means also that, the conversation can continue with the client manager in that paradigm of what we're trying to achieve.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Anubhav asked a question in the chat about if we've got offshore team members, which you mentioned you have, to
Yes.
what extent are they talking directly with clients, if at all? So in other words, is there a delineation between the people you have in the Parramatta office and the offshore team in the way in which they interact with clients?
Yes and no. So horses for courses. So one of my larger clients has, who's a tech business, they have their offshore clients about their offshore staff about 300 metres from where ours are. And our gig in that particular client is a full CFO role. So some of the offshore team is communicating daily with that client's team to understand transactions and the bookkeeping matters. In terms of engagement with our offshore team, a couple of things there. Firstly, we quickly worked out that you have to align the cultures of your offshore team and your onshore team very quickly. The second thing is that you should never assume that they understand our language, which is Australian English, and they have a slightly different version of things. Some words are used in different contexts. Third thing is that we would go out on a quarterly basis, and it was for the first 2 or 3 years, to actually train them And once we got to that level, they were working seamlessly between offshore and onshore. Third thing is we now, using Teams, which I think most people are familiar with, Microsoft Teams through the 365, our daily huddle is on Teams, and all of our team members are on that daily huddle, no matter where they are. So I'm sitting at home today. There's a couple of people in the office. There's some people offshore. There's people at home. There might be somebody, in their car because they've dropped the kids off at school, but they're on that team meeting. And that provides engagement, also reinforces the culture of what we're doing.
Perfect. So one team approach, but very absolute clarity around the sort of work that each individual is doing with clients as well. So that's really clarity. Important. Yeah.
And the other thing is that we have a very flat structure. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a hierarchical structure of, something's got to go up through supervisor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until it hits a partner, and then, all the way down. We've got a very flat structure, and we've got a very open structure that, people communicate readily between each other.
Right. Great. Can I come back to this advisory idea? And I love what you said about let's help the clients understand what their goals are and then move towards them achieving those goals. So, and you and I have worked together for a long time. You've heard me say this often. So stay close to the numbers. We're accountants. What numbers? what numbers have you found?
I may have been influenced a little bit by that, Colin.
Right. Yeah. So as you think about that and the client work that you've done in the advisory space, what sort of numbers have you found have been important to clients? Because it's not just about the P&L and balance sheets.
No, it's not. So first of all, different businesses, you've got to watch different numbers, and I'll give you a perfect example. So working with one of my clients who's essentially they provide finance and non-bank finance. So they measure term sheets, the number of term sheets that have gone out.
Right.
Because that, in other words, allows them to judge what their pipeline is going to be going forward, because they've got a history of, what that means. So that's probably their big number. They know that if, they've issued 20 term sheets this week, they've got a lot of work coming up. So that's an example of it. I've got another client, and their be-all and end-all number is utilisation of their hire fleet. Mm-hmm. So everything comes down to utilisation. So when actually there's a couple of numbers there. There's utilisation, and then in terms of the sales team, it's the daily rate of hire that salesperson is looking after. Those two numbers are those two numbers right, everything else falls into place. That's not to say you're not watching your budgets and all of those things and all of that, but they're the leading numbers that'll indicate things are going well or there's a looming problem.
So just so I understand, you would typically start with goals. So what are we trying to achieve? Then there might be some high level review of priorities using numbers, and we'll talk about the growth equation in a moment, because I know you've used that a couple of times. But then once you engage a client, you find that you can drill even deeper and go more granular on what's important to them. And incidentally, with the term sheets example you gave there, that would be that business's way of quantifying their number of leads generated, right? And then number of accepted term sheets, that would give you a measure of their sales conversion rates. And so there are some high level generic measures, I think, that we can apply across any business. Would you agree with that?
That's the point I was making. So our best clients we meet with monthly. And, typically would be a management report. a P&L balance sheet. If they've got a consolidated entity, we've got some nice consolidation software which can give quick snapshots with eliminations of what's going on. And we would look at those figures, but we would also look at those key numbers as well. So we're not forgetting about all those other numbers, but it's really, so what is the most important thing that you focus on in your business that if you work on is going to change things? And you mentioned the growth equation, and that is a great tool for developing those things. And if I can give an example there, Colin. So I'm working with a guy who runs a gym. If you can imagine somebody running a gym, there is no business at the moment. But he's now thinking about when things open up a little bit. And interestingly enough, his business is training not kids but youth, so from about 14 through to about 22, and they tend to end up in elite sport, or maybe represent Australia, etc., etc. I did the growth equation with him, and he was absolutely startled that you could break down the numbers by, well, how many people have you got? What is their monthly fee? What other stuff do they buy off you? Okay, you do it in groups of 12. That sort of end, trying to sort of play with those numbers to say, okay, can you do 14? What would happen if you did 14? Would you have to have 2 assistants or 3? That sort of stuff. And just playing with those numbers. What's the capacity inside your gym for a number of people? So even a simple business like that, the growth equation is just a fantastic tool. What came out of that was that he understood his numbers better than he'd ever understood them before.
Right.
Right. He really understood what's driving his profit.
Exactly. And Michael, just for the benefit of those who perhaps haven't seen growth equation, this is about understanding the business drivers. So what drives or influences success? Some of these numbers might not be on the profit and loss income statement or balance sheet, and often, and you can probably attest to this.
When do you see term sheets? Whenever do you see term sheets on your profit and loss?
Exactly, or how am I going to create a new customer? And so this is the stuff that keeps clients awake at night, and really importantly, I think, is they're not equally important. And so we need to choose what matters most. And so you might be looking at some of the drivers that you see on the screen right there. And what Michael's describing for you is getting very focused on those key drivers, understanding where they sit right now, and then setting some targets, and then figuring out the most important of all of those targets. Mike, we've got 10 minutes to go. So I've got a couple of important questions for you. Tony says, great stuff. Thanks for sharing, by the way. Quick question from John.
Thank you, Tony. That's Tiny Tony, I'm sure.
Tiny Tony, yep.
Yep.
John asks, are you using any cash flow or consolidation software?
Specifically, yes. So we use Futurely for our 3-way projections. Profit and loss, budget forecast, pretty easy. Budget, pretty easy. Balance sheet, reasonably easy. Cash flow forecast. Don't expect it to work every time. You've got to really drive your cash flow forecasts, and there's no tool that's perfect in that area, right? But you need to explain to your clients, this is at this point of time. Tomorrow this will change because something's happened, Consolidation software, there's a product called Zenflow. Guy out of Singapore uses it. It'll consolidate 0 files quite well. Takes a bit of time to get your head around using it, but it's pretty good. I've got one entity with 8 companies, 2 don't trade, but the rest do. And one of those is a service company. And, yeah, so they're the 2 things. We've tried other ones. I think in terms of the, the 3-way budgeting, I think you just got to pick one, and you got to train, and, get the people who sell the product to actually give you their time to explain how to use it, because they all work.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, yeah. Quick question, because I want to show something to everyone who's with us today.
Colin, before we do, I just want to say, I think there's also, don't expect the software to be the magic bullet.
Right, very important.
What you do with your numbers is what's important. So you've got to go all the way back. You've got to have good information coming in. You've got to understand what you're trying to achieve with the software, and you've got to have the processes to be able to do things quickly. So when it comes to something like Futurely, and I noticed somebody said they found it difficult to use, I don't do most of that. My team does most of that.
Right.
I talk about the high level stuff, what we're trying to achieve. And that comes out of training and, talking to people and going over and over again, so they truly understand what we're trying to achieve out of that software.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let me just quickly run through something, and you've not seen this before either, so this might be, I'm interested in your thoughts. We're constantly thinking about what help clients might need now from their accountants in the advisory space. So this is a marketing conundrum as much as anything. Let me just run through a quick case study here as to the sort of work that we're doing with some accounting firms as we come out. And for those watching a recording, we're on May 27 in Australia here. So we've been stuck in the pandemic for 2 months. So what do we do next on the other side? Well, I think the first thing that we all need to do if we want to do more advisory work is build awareness with clients. And so there's sometimes a disconnect between what you believe you can do and what clients understand you can do. And so, for example, sending out content can help with that. So right now, if we were sending out content with that sort of theme, so from survival to resilience, shifting that focus, that might be something worthwhile. That could be an interesting idea. Once we've built some awareness, then we need to reach out and gather information from clients, because some clients aren't affected at all, some are badly affected, some are about the same. And so we need to get a sense from the clients as to how they're feeling and where their business is right now, so that you can best help them. And if we can reach out to all clients and use a questionnaire and make that questionnaire consistent with content that we previously put forward, then that makes sense. So there's coherence there in what we're doing. So let's imagine 200 people get a piece of content for you, 100 read it, 10 then engage with you and complete a questionnaire. Once they engage, wouldn't it be interesting to then be able to engage back with them? And perhaps you have a guide. So a guide to building business resilience. And this could be a short guide, it could be a long guide, it could be several steps and so on, where you'll provide some content to the clients. And then there's the ability for the client to interact with this guide, and they learn things about their business, and perhaps they can get some plans together. But Michael, you said it. It's one thing to know what to do. It's another to say how to do it. But then it's yet another thing to actually do it. And this is where you step in. And so accountants, now you add some value, and you're going to get paid for this in terms of, you could do some planning with the client, or you could sit with them and run a project with the client, or you can simply hold them accountable to do what they said they were going to do. So we're calling
all three, preferably all three, Colin.
Preferably all three, right? So we're calling this a resilience campaign, and you can get involved in this if you choose to do so. So the campaign basically is 3 stages. To summarize what I've talked about, firstly, it's reaching out to prove your credentials. Without you shouting out and saying, we can do this, nobody's going to believe you, especially if they go to your website and it says, we've been in business since 1926 doing tax returns. I know that's not what anyone on this call is doing, but we need to seriously think about the message we're putting out there, then engaging to generate those conversations, and then thirdly, defining clients' needs and acting on them. So Michael, you talked about the growth equation. That would be a logical thing to use with a client as you're engaging with them there. And perhaps that's supported with content to show you how to do the things that your clients need doing to help them improve their business. And so what we're structuring here for those of you on the call who are interested is a 90-day program. So in other words, you don't need to get involved in a 2 or 3 year program. And like you said it, the first step is the important thing sometimes. Just do something is going to be important here. So a 90-day program where we'll train you into how are you going to use the growth equation? How are you going to have the conversations with your clients? We'll do the heavy lifting. So we'll create the article, we'll build the questionnaire, we'll build the guide. You can involve multiple team members in the process, and then we'll help you customize that if you choose for your business as well. And we've kept the price very low because we want to help accountants become better advisors here. And so let's remove those barriers so that you can get involved if you want to do that. But what that means is we have some capacity issues. So we can only take on 5 firms in each market. So 5 in Australasia, 5 in North America, and 5 in Europe. So Michael, before I ask you one final question, if you're interested and you're listening live, just type marketing in the questions box. We'll get back to you with some more information. If you're listening to a recording, just create an email to info@panalitix.com and marketing in the subject heading. We'll get back to you with information as well. You'll get access to Marketing Hub and Client Insights, the Growth Equation, and the Learning Hub for 90 days as we work with you at just $100 a month. And that includes the setup and the training as well. So Michael, what we're trying to do here is just help people get involved and get started, get a leg up, and start that 10-year journey that you've talked about with something simple. Does that make sense?
To me, absolutely. Look, I don't know who the quote's from, but it's the first step of 1,000 miles. Is the first step. That's where it begins.
Right.
If you don't take a step, and if you don't do something, you're going to be where you were, and you're not going to move. That's the issue. So, jump in. $100 a month. It's not going to change anybody's life, is it? Really?
Exactly.
That's pretty good, by the way. I didn't know that, and I haven't seen that, Colin. So
there you go.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And like Colin, when I talked about us, when early in March when this pandemic was emerging, phoning clients saying we want to talk to you. That's exactly what we did. We engaged with them, and during that conversation, they told us roughly what was happening. We had clients that said, we're actually busier now than we've been before, because whatever they were doing was busy. So, for example, we had a guy that does pool maintenance for local councils say, we're flat out. They brought all of their maintenance forward. We never would have expected that. No. Never in a million years would we have expected that. But there's the point. You have to engage with your clients to find out what's going on. You've got to talk to them about this stuff, and not 9 months after the year's over to say, here's your tax returns, here's the amount of tax you're paying, and here's your bill. That's not a pleasant conversation.
Right.
But phoning them today and saying, how are you, what's going on, how are you emerging from this, is a totally different conversation. How can we help?
Absolutely.
So, that fits in exactly with our philosophy.
Perfect. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up, Michael. Thank you to Joe for letting us know. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step is by Lao Shu.
That's it. Thank you.
There you go. So we have great interaction. So thank you all for interacting with us today. And for those of you who have typed marketing, thank you. We'll reach out. We'll be in touch, and looking forward to working with you there. Michael, thank you so much for giving so graciously of your time. It's been wonderful talking with you and hearing about the journey that you had. And
Colin,
wish you
it's
continued success.
The least it can do. We would not be the firm we are without Panalitix and yourself, your good self, because we've worked with you and you've helped us because you've been through these things and we've talked about this stuff. So a big thank you from ATB to Panalitix and particularly Colin Dunn.
You're very
It's been
kind.
a pleasure.
You're very kind. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Jonathan will run one poll just to get your feedback on the session today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please join us again next month when we'll be running another webinar. Watch out for those invitations. Until then, all the very best. Take care, stay safe, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Colin. Bye-bye.